Hi, it's Nicole. I'm going to tell you about all the books I read in February. I had no specific theme or plan for February. I felt a bit fed up. I just wanted to rest in some simple and delightful stories. And as you will see, I had a marvelous reading month with many 4-star books. The first one is The Lost Spells by Robert Macfarlane. I came across The Lost Spells by chance in my library app. I saw the keywords like nature, Robert Macfarlane, children, poetry, sound design, and artwork, and I borrowed it immediately. The Lost Spells is a collection of poems about nature, trees and wildflowers and wild animals. And if you've been watching my videos, you'd know that I've always struggled with poetry, but I thoroughly loved this collection. Not sure if it's because it's written for children or it's because it's contemporary. The physical book comes with beautiful artwork. It took a lot of discipline to resist buying a copy. I listened to the audiobook and it's equally beautiful and even more unique, I'd say, than the physical book. The poems are beautifully read and the sound of nature wrapping around the words is just out of this world. The audiobook is not long, only about 40 minutes, but I listened to it for about 5 times from the beginning to the end this month. Next one, Romanticism, a very short introduction. This is my attempt at understanding the Romantic movement. I'd say this is one of the more accessible ones in this series. I was interested because the works from the Romantic period are on my Reading Oxford Year 2 curriculum and I wanted an overview of some sorts. It gives a loose definition of the term Romanticism and introduces many important poets, but also the characteristics of the poet figure. It talks about sensibility, the relationship between Romanticism and the French Revolution, and Romanticism and the Industrial Revolution. Most of the book is informative and interesting, just above my level of understanding, with me standing on tiptoes. It helps me get a bigger view of this subject. The next one is Grasmere Journal by Dorothy Wordsworth. Dorothy was William Wordsworth's sister. They lived in Grasmere together and this is her diary from 1800 to 1803. It's an ordinary diary recording their everyday life, what's the weather like, what time they get up and go to bed, who sends them letters and visits them, what kind of housework and gardening they do, where they go on for walks, etc. When I read this diary, I had the mixed feeling of I wish I could live a life as simple like theirs next to Grasmere, and their life sounds a bit dull. I still can't make up my mind whether I want a life like theirs or not. A few things happen often, therefore stand out. Dorothy was afraid of cows. Thursday, 18th March 1802, I went through the fields. Sat half an hour afraid to pass a cow. The cow looked at me and I looked at the cow. And whenever I stirred, the cow gave over eating. Receiving no letters every day was a big deal. She always wrote, "No letters!" with an exclamation mark. I guess it's a bit like we say something like, "No text messages for a whole day." Something like that maybe. William, Dorothy and Coleridge seemed to be ill all the time, one way or another, but whatever the illness was, it didn't seem to stop her from doing anything. Wednesday, 31st March 1802, very unwell. We walked to Pontinscale, lay upon the turf and saw into the Vale of Newlands, up to Borrowdale and down to Keswick, a soft Venetian view. It's about 15 miles from Grasmere to Keswick. It takes about 5 hours to walk and she said she was unwell. William had a very irregular sleeping pattern and he often slept badly when he worked on his poems. William Wordsworth might be worshipped as a poetry genius, but Dorothy's diary clearly and honestly records the painful amount of work he required to be a genius. Friday, 7th May. William had slept uncommonly well, so, feeling himself strong, he fell to work at the leech gatherer. He wrote hard at it till dinner time, then he gave over tired to death. He had finished the poem. Dorothy records their daily activities in detail, but gives very little explanation. For example, she would say something like, Coleridge's letter darkens our evening, but wouldn't explain what the letter was about. Or she would say, we whitewashed all the walls in the cottage, but wouldn't say the significance of it. And one day, they all suddenly went on a tour to Yorkshire, London, Calais, and Dover. And the next sentence reads, on Monday, 4th October 1802, my brother William was married to Mary Hutchinson without warning at all. And then after that, it's all about traveling and nature again. I guess to be fair, she wasn't keeping the diaries for us. We will never learn what happened on Sunday, 18th October 1801. The entry reads, I have forgotten. I think she caught up a few days in one go usually, so he has forgotten what she did on Sunday. I am really glad of the notes in this Oxford World Classics edition. Without them, most of the entries wouldn't have made sense at all. The next pair of books are English, Pastoral, and The Shepherd's Life by James Rebanks. The Shepherd's Life is my all-time favorite, and I've read it a couple of times. English, Pastoral is the second book written by the same author and was published in 2020. It's still about farming in the Lake District, and the writing is just as good, but there's a big difference, I think, and because of it, I don't love it as much as the first book. The Shepherd's Life is personal. It talks about his childhood, his relationship with his father and grandfather, his experience with school and university, and his daily tasks around the farm, like lambing, like making hay, and training sheepdogs. It's fascinating. English Pastoral talks about farming but on a higher level and wider view. It talks about food production, environment, old and new farming system, agriculture politics, consumer and supermarket. It's very informative and educational, but because I think more than half of the book are on these bigger issues, it at times felt a bit like lectures. If that's what you set out to read, it's a brilliant book. But because I expected the book to be more like The Shepherd's Life, I wasn't as keen. But it did help me to understand Lake District farming a bit better, and it nudges me to make better choices, or at least think about the choices I make when I shop. I admire how he responds to the millions of challenges around the farm, big and small, and how he is open to see new things and different things, and how he accepts and makes changes when it's right and necessary, and how he carves out his own path according to the present time as well as his own convictions. Because I wasn't as keen, so I was worried I wouldn't have liked The Shepherd's Life as much as before. So I hurriedly listened to the audiobook again, and I still love it very much. Next one is When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit by Judith Kerr. It's a lovely children's story about a Jewish family's life around the time when Hitler rose to power. It's an autobiographical novel. The author and her family had to flee Germany and move from country to country in order to live when she was little. It was a dark and scary time, but because the children were slightly insulated from the danger and fear, and the story was written from the child's point of view, so the story mostly comes across tender and full of life. And what I love most about the book is how the author shows what goes on in a 10-year-old girl's head. Hello, I'm back. I had to go out for a few hours. That's why the light might have changed a bit. The next pair of books are Winnie the Pooh and A House at Pooh Corner by A.A. Milne. I have now gladly caught up with this piece of the British childhood. Obviously, I know the characters from Winnie the Pooh for years and years, but this was the first time I read the original stories themselves. Again, I listened to the audiobooks. They were read by Bernard Cribbins. They were just the most adorable and magical stories. A few things I discovered along the way. Pooh Bear might be a bear with very little brain. He is certainly an excellent poet. I was also surprised to learn that the most educated animal in the forest is not owl at all. And Kanga and Roo appear quite early on in the stories. and Tigger is a quite late addition. There was a scene in the film Christopher Robin when Christopher Robin came back from the Second World War and told his father that the English soldiers, when they were out in the cold, wet and hungry, fearing for tomorrow, they would tell stories from Winnie the Pooh for comfort. I now know what sort of stories they were telling each other. What a contrast it would have been. I wonder if they thought the war was the reality and the Pooh Bear and the forest was a distant dream, or did they try to convince themselves and each other that one day they will go home to this green and peaceful land and the battlefield was a nightmare that they would wake up from one day. Next one is Truth on Fire by Adam Ramsey. It's a Christian non-fiction book published in 2021. The goal of the book is to help Christians to love God with both their mind and their heart, both their brain and their emotions. It has a lot of helpful chapters, especially for me, the chapter on patience is very helpful. But I have to say the introduction sets a very high expectation, and I'm not sure the book achieves the goal and live up to that expectation. Next book is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. What can I say? This is the ultimate, I don't care, I just want to read some comforting book situation. Even though it's so familiar, I still thoroughly enjoyed it. I first read the whole set of Harry Potter books in Chinese, and I hope the translators were properly paid. The translation was excellent. The next one is an essay, a note on Jane Austen from selected literary essays by C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis seems to have opinion on everything, and it's usually brilliant. C.S. Lewis categorized 6 Jane Austen's novels into 2 groups and has some very interesting insights into the characters. I will put the link in the description box and you can also watch the video here. I won't waste your time repeating it. Five Red Herrings by Dorothy L. Sayers. I did a reading vlog all about this murder mystery this month, and a few days after I posted that video, I learned that I pronounced the place name completely wrong for the whole time. Apologies. It's not Kirkcudbright, it is actually Kirkcudbright. Who can tell? But anyway, I am going on a holiday to Kirkcudbright, I'm very excited to say, and I might be visiting the crime scene. Who knows? You can watch me solving the murder mystery here. Last one, White Ravens by Owen Shears. White Ravens is my first Welsh novel. It borrows a story from the Welsh folklore Mabinogion and puts it in a modern setting. It blends ancient myth and the Second World War and the present time seamlessly. It's beautifully written. Again, I will put it in my description box and you can see it here. That's all the books I read in February. I hope you find something interesting to give it a go. So that's all for today. I'll see you in my next one. Bye.